Well, welcome to another rendition of The Cutting Edge, where we discuss all things health and wellness. I'm Omar Neal, former mayor of Tuskegee, Alabama, as well as the host of the You Got the Power show. And of course, we are engaging in a month of understanding and saluting Black history. This particular show will focus on grief in the season of COVID-19. We want you to follow us and join with us every Thursday from 7 to 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, 6 to 7:30 Central Standard Time. And you can follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. And of course, make sure that you like and follow. Well, today I'm excited because a group of people having this conversation with us. I could not have chosen a better cast to have this conversation. We're going to be talking with Dr. Harry Close. We're going to be talking with Judge Pastor Tracy Hunter, and we'll be talking with my dear friend Royce Kennebrew. And of course, but we can't talk to any of them before we first bring up my co-host, which is Dr. Stephen Thomas. We call him Dr. T in this space. Hey, Dr. T, how you doing, man?
Hey, it's always good to be here with you every Thursday night. And what a lineup. You know, you're becoming a really, really good producer.
Well, you know, 30 years kind of help you with that.
You know, and have Reverend Close come back to the show. He's been with us early on, and the course of this pandemic has just been an amazing eye-opener. Hey, a silver lining, my friend. I think that our frank discussions about issues of race are important, and the need to make sure that the innovations that have come out of this pandemic are not dismantled as the surge goes down. Hey, Omar, you think they're going to try to spike the ball again on the 5-yard line this time and declare the touchdown, or will it be a fumble?
Well, you know, I think that, you know, when you start politicizing a pandemic and you make a kind of judgment as to how many people is enough. You know, somebody said one time, and it made all the sense in the world. They said that how many people do you think is, in terms of collateral damage from COVID-19, is enough? Is 50 enough? And the person say, yeah, about 50. I think if you had 50 people, that would, you know, that would be suitable. And then they said, well, look behind you. And all 50 people were part of their family. Now they say, now, how many people should we say is enough or suitable or acceptable in terms of them dying from COVID? They said 0. You know, until we get to a point where one person who died from COVID needlessly is too many, right? Until we get to that place, we are really missing the mark, and we are spiking the ball on the 5-yard line. And when you spike the ball on the 5-yard line, that's not a touchdown. That's a fumble.
All right.
Right. And so we really got to rethink this thing. But you know what I have to say? Everybody has to take ownership and responsibility for their own lives. Right.
That's right.
Regardless of what the government says, regardless of what business say, whatever, you know your vulnerabilities, right? And you know that you have to, you have to be mindful and cautious of what you do, not only for you, but for people who are around you. And that's one of the things that people don't understand. A lot of people have gone and they have spread COVID to people, maybe wittingly or unwittingly, right? And those people are no longer with us. And
that's a lot of guilt.
That's a lot of guilt that's associated with that. So we're going to talk about, you know, this notion of grief. Let me say this, man. I've had so many people in recent days and weeks who have passed. We were supposed to have Reverend Tony Roberts on, and he shared with me, and our prayers go out to him.
Yes.
He shared with me that he had over 10 people in close people to die within the last few months. And then just yesterday, a day before yesterday, he had another one to die, which really was just took him over the edge. He couldn't even come on. That's the kind of thing. But not only that, man, we're having people die all around. And when Dr. Close come on, I'm going to talk about a dear friend of mine who passed this morning, early this morning, late last night, certainly after we were off, who is Robert Burton, who his son, Howard Burton, was the president of the organization that Dr. Close is the president of at this point. Okay. And he's like a brother to me, but his father died last night. His mother was my teacher. His father has been in the funeral home business all of my life and before in Tuskegee, Alabama. And so our hearts and our prayers go out to the Burton family for loss of a patriot of the family and a pillar of the Tuskegee community. And, you know, in just one more, had the young lady, Renetta Mays, who was going to be with us at the end of this month. Her husband was shot and killed in New Orleans, and found out about that. And so our prayers go out to Renetta Mays Murray. And she just got married, I guess, in less than a year ago. And now he's gone. So, you know, it's a lot of pain. Yes. And I could go on and on and on, but I won't, because it would take the entire show. But the point of the matter is we got to learn to address this and to pay attention to it, and also be empathetic with people who are going through it. Because if you're not going through it, if it hasn't happened to you, you are nothing but next. And people need to know that. So
imagine what can be done behind the chair. Imagine what can be done behind the chair and what they're hearing. Right, their customers behind the chair.
Right. So let's bring up a few people. Let's bring up Dr. Harry Close first. And you know, as you said, Dr. Close is you know, hadn't been with us a while. Dr. Close is always with us because he's with us in spirit. Dr. Close is a regular here on the Cutting Edge. He's been on with us multiple times. Every time he comes on, we always get back by popular demand, because everybody wants to have him back on. And they said, well, when are you going to have Dr. Close back on? I said, hold up, we can't have him on every night. But we wish we could, because he brings so much energy and so much truth to the conversation. You see all of his accolades there. We would spend the rest of this evening if we were to just delineate them. But let's needless to say, he is the national president of the National Funeral Home Directors and Morticians Association. He is a licensed mortician, a professor. He is a preacher, personified. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome to the Cutting Edge, Dr. Harry P. Close II.
All right, Dr. Close. This is how we do it here, Reverend. We got to do the snaps all over the internet.
How to make you look important and sound important. But I really, Dr. T and Mayor Omar, I really appreciate to be with my distinguished colleagues this evening. And this is a subject matter that's kind of hit home. And you mentioned some of our guests that were supposed to come. I have experienced just in that aspect of losing so many people that it's becoming overwhelming, even though people think that funeral directors are elated with this particular crisis. Is just the opposite. And one, we you know, I've shared in the past that this is not the type of business that we really are excited about. We really are concerned, because not only is taking out a community, it's taking out people who just don't realize how important it is to take a vaccine. And then the other part is we all have this death around us, and how are we dealing with this? You know, and people think we're immune as funeral directors. People think because of preachers we're immune. And in the African American community, it's taking out the ministers, it's taking out the funeral directors who are prominent in touching the people in the community. And how do you grieve as pastors? We always know that a pastor needs a pastor. Well, during grieving process, each of us need to be grieving together. And who actually helps the person who's supposed to be encouraging the people to grieve, and they're grieving their own selves.
Right.
And I guess I'll use that line. Most of my colleagues who are in the ministry know that the shortest verse in the Bible is Jesus wept. And I stay with some young men saying, well, let me say it another way. Let the healing waters flow. It's okay to cry. Matter of fact, those tear ducts are for us to release the burden, to clear our heads. And this pandemic has affected everyone's life. No one can't say they haven't been touched by it. And how do we move forward? Hopefully tonight, that in our discussion and sharing, that individuals who are listening will be able to get some techniques of how to deal with it. And I want to be transparent. I probably will be moved in some aspects of sharing tonight, because it's hit me home, that I have buried so many colleagues. I don't know what to say sometimes when I'm going to their services. And I've lost some dear, dear, dear friends from this pandemic. And it is difficult. My whole sleep pattern has changed. I'm sleeping early in the day and up all night, and then go to sleep and back at work doing another 12, 15 hours. One of my colleagues asked me yesterday, how many hours are in a day? I said, 24. And they said, so how many hours are you doing? And they said, well, let me ask you this. How many hours are you sleeping? Right. And maybe about 3.5 hours if I really get a good sleep forward.
Right.
And that's part of the grief process. We had to change, the eating process changed. And I'm just glad this subject matter, and I'm really listening, looking forward to hearing from my sister pastor, her Uncle Hunter, because everyone learns from each other. And I'm gonna be taking my own notes, because to put some things in place, and hopefully healing thyself by listening to someone.
Yeah. I just want to thank you for giving permission. I just want to say to Reverend Close, thank you for giving people permission to allow their full range of emotions to be expressed, especially the men out there.
Yeah.
And so this is a safe space. We have created a sacred space in these Thursday night events. So thank you for also sharing your humility as we get into this conversation. All right, Omar.
As I see it, it's like bleeding while leading, where you're having to bear your own burdens at the same time, be there for other people. And that's a difficult thing. Let's bring up Judge Pastor Tracy Hunter. She absolutely has made history. She hails from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Bingo town.
Absolutely. And
Super Bowl.
Let me tell you something about this young lady. She's the first Democrat, the first woman to be elected to the juvenile court of Cincinnati.
Okay.
Now this is 100+ years. You got it. So I'm letting you know that she's special in that way, but not only that, she's a special spirit. She's small in stature, but I don't know anybody bigger than her in her spirit. So ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming a dear friend of mine. I call her my pastor, Judge Pastor Tracy Hunter.
All right, here comes
Judge,
the judge.
How you doing?
And from the Buckeye State.
I'm sorry, let me unmute myself. I guess I should say hooday.
All right.
Absolutely. So one is, let me stop and call a part-time out. Congratulations.
Yes.
On reaching the Super Bowl. I'm sure.
Come on now. Come on.
A lot of things happening. I mean, it's been a long, as they said, it's been a long time coming, but a change gonna come, right? And it did. It came this year, right?
Yes, they're about ready to declare, I think the Monday after, a national holiday here.
I can imagine the hoopla that's going on in Cincinnati at this time, right? It's unbelievable. But let me just start out by, I want you to tell the audience, and I probably should have said that with Dr. Close, um, but he has a way of doing that, expressing himself in a way. But I want you to tell the audience who Judge Pastor Tracy Hunter is.
Well, let's see here. As you already stated, I was the first Democrat elected to the Hamilton County Juvenile Court, but I do need to correct this. I was the first Black person elected to the Hamilton County Juvenile Court. There were, I think, at least one or two Caucasian women before me, but I was actually the first Black woman in 100
So you're the first years. Black woman. Okay.
No,
okay.
The first Black period, male or female.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
All right.
And
Okay.
so
We're still breaking ceilings.
absolutely. Right. I was also the first actually elected, the first African-American elected to the Common Pleas Court here in Cincinnati, Ohio, that was actually elected and not appointed or not put in office by a special deal that they had to make between the Republicans and Democrats in order to put a Black person there. I actually won the very first election in the history of Hamilton County. But more importantly, I am the pastor of the Western Hills Brethren in Christ Church in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I was also the first Black and the first female to pastor this church. And I've been a pastor going on, this will be my 13th year in July.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. So it's been a blessing, but I will echo Dr. Close in that, you know, as a pastor, I've had the unfortunate experience of burying a number of persons during COVID. I've presided over young funerals, older funerals, and it's real, you know, what's going on out here. And so I spend a lot of time as a pastor trying to help our members to stay safe, as well as trying to encourage, advise. It's difficult. You know, I have a mask. I closed my church only for about 3 months, I believe March 2020 to June 2020. And I opened back up because it was important that in the midst of everything that was going on in the world, all of the national voices, the talking heads, we needed Jesus. We needed the Spirit of God needed to be present and active. We needed the voice of the church. And so my church has actually been open the entire time. I have persons that come whose churches are closed, sometimes just because of COVID, other times because there's an outbreak in the church. I've been blessed and fortunate that, you know, we haven't had an outbreak per se, but yes, I have had persons to get COVID, but I enforce very stringent mask requirements here. To me, that's the very least that anybody can do.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
you know, when we have wall-to-wall funerals, I remember doing a funeral that I knew was going to be packed. It wasn't at my church, but I was doing it at a funeral home. And this particular funeral home, it wasn't an African-American funeral home. And so they actually had a policy on the door that said that masks were not required. People could do what they wanted. I told the persons that whose funeral I was presiding over, I said, listen, there are going to be young people, as I'm not young, and it's important to me to keep people safe. And the only way I will do this funeral is if everyone wears masks. And so the funeral home in this big chapel, you had one side that had persons all entering without masks. On the side I was presiding over the funeral, they were coming in with masks. And then when I started seeing people come in that didn't have masks, I said to the funeral, director, I said, why are these people coming in without masks? They said, we ran out. I said, you know what? I have some in my car. Someone needs to go to my car, get the mask, bring them in, and everybody needs to be masked. And then the funeral that I just had a couple of weeks ago, the same thing. I'm doing my best as a pastor, not only to provide hope and encouragement, but to give them the wisdom and instruction that is also necessary during this time.
Wow.
Thank you.
Good. Thanks so much, Pastor Tracy Hunter. I call her Judge. I've always called you Judge. You've always just called me Mayor. And that's kind of how we've always greeted each other. So if I interchange between pastor and judge, it's just how we do it. But I have called her Judge because I'm very proud of her and what she did and the ceilings that she broke through. And we still got a lot of work to do. And we're going to talk about that at some later point, another show.
But I can see why. I can see why.
She's powerful, man. I'm just so happy to have her with us. Well, last but certainly not least, they say Royce Kennebrew. who is is like another brother.
All
To
right.
me. He's an author, educator, and DEI trainer. He's a person who has dubbed in the political arena, ran for Congress, and he's from Detroit, Michigan. But what I have come to understand about Royce Kennebrew is that he's a truth teller. This he's very well read, and he has a way of capsulating concepts in a way that even a baby can understand it. He put it where the goats can get it, Dr. T. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming my dear friend, Royce Kennebrew.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Omar, for having me online. To my other guests, thank you for being here with this illustrious panel. You know, the topic was so inviting and enticing because it is something that we are all dealing with and suffering with. Just this week, I was speaking at a school to parents and speaking to educators of the school, really talking to them about trauma-informed practices, social and emotional learning, things that they can do to deal with the grief and the trauma that all stakeholders are feeling in the school right now. And it's so much needed because they talk about the behavior that the children are showing from being these last 2 years in and out, hybrid and virtual and in school and mask and no mask, depending on the school that you're at. And it has had an impact on them. And when they are suffering, they bring the suffering to their homes and they bring the suffering to school. And so I was talking to teachers just yesterday about what are some things that they can do to the school environment to help deal with grief and to deal with trauma.
You know, I'm so happy that you are doing that work, man. That's a tremendous. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing. That's incredible. I want to contextualize this conversation in a way that gives us an understanding that we're talking about human beings. We're not talking about statistics. Sometimes statistics cease to motivate people. So I'm going to bring Meg Jordan on, who is our chief tech person, but she does what we call run the numbers for me. And so I want to bring. No, this is not the public health minute. This is running the numbers. So Meg, I want you to run the numbers.
All right. Good evening, everybody. This week, we have had 1.6 million people who have gotten COVID in the past week. 18,000 people have died this week. And only 1.1 million Americans have gotten fully vaccinated that weren't before. This is lower than last week. 1.9 million people have gotten boosters in the past week, which is higher than last week. But we really want to look at the bigger numbers. Next, Maggie, please. So we now know that 77.2 million Americans have gotten COVID, or people can get COVID more than once. We know that. But 911,000 people have passed away from COVID-19 in the past 2 years. And tonight we want to talk about who those 119,000 people are. Next, Maggie. So when we think about those 900 people, 2/3 of them were over the age of 65, and they were more likely to be Hispanic or Black. When we think about people aged 30 to 64, that was 224,000 people. That's your parent age, right? Of people, that's your prime earning years of your life, right? And then, you know, we've long talked about how COVID and kids and that relationship. 6,300 kids have died of COVID, or people under the age of 29. And like that affected Black youth more than anyone else. Next, please, Maggie. When they make up the death certificates for COVID-19, they also write down other things that were going on with the person's health when they died. So almost half of people who've died of COVID-19 also had the flu or pneumonia and pneumonia. So the flu is critically important when you're talking about COVID-19. 163,000 of these people also had high blood pressure. 134,000 had diabetes, and 44,000 of them were also obese. So these are where your health conditions really matter. Next, please, Maggie. On average, every person who passes away leaves 9 family members experiencing that grief. And so total, about 182 million Americans are in mourning.
Thanks so very much. Is that it?
Yep, those are the numbers this week, everybody.
Thanks so much, Meg. Meg Jordan, who runs the numbers for us weekly, and we're so appreciative. I want to have a conversation now. I wanted you all to understand the magnitude of the issue that we are having. When you talk about people talking about it's over with, and then you notice the number of people who died just in the last week, right? It's as if, we have calculated that that 100,000 people is not a lot of people, right? Let me just put in perspective something that Dr. Michael Osterholm said. He said that if you were to start naming the people who have died of COVID-19, just start naming them one at a time, it would take you an entire year naming them 24/7. 24 hours, 7 days a week. It would take you an entire year to name them all. And when you look at it from that vantage point, then look at not just that person, but as Meg indicated, 9 other people on average were directly impacted by the death of that person, which can create generational poverty, because many of them, as you notice, she talked about breadwinners. We got to talk about those things. And so this is why I wanted to lay out the conversation. I want to go to you first, Royce, because you operate in that space. Because when we're talking about the fact that, and you mentioned the fact that the Black-white wealth gap is tremendous. I want you to talk about it in terms of exacerbating an already challenging issue, particularly for the African-American community.
Well, there are so many related detriments to the African-American community, so many that come to mind. The first thing was that in regards to learning, we're talking about young people and learning, is that when you suffer so many episodes of trauma, they're called adverse childhood experiences. They call them ACEs. The social scientists and the counselors and people will tell them. And when you have so many, it does something to your brain chemistry, the brain science. It moves you from the learning brain, which we all are supposed to be in, to what's called the survival brain. And when you are moved in survival brain, if you look at the diagram, the part that says cognition or learning is the smallest part of the triangle, meaning that children have been traumatized to the point where what they came to school to do, they are virtually unable to do. And so then you have the behavior issues that arise from that. And then there's another statistic that I want to point out real quickly as it relates to the economic piece. 1/5 of children in the 2020, the 2020-2021 school year, last school year, 1/5 of those children missed the first state test around the country. That means that they were not in school. And people are now starting to deduce is that the reason that they missed those tests is because they either had to move, they had some type of economic hardship, housing insecurity, food insecurity, where they were not able to maintain their normal behavior patterns that they always had, and then they had to move. And so that talks directly to the impact of economically people being hurt. If you got to move, then your money's not right. And so those are things that have impacted young folks in the economic hardship piece.
Thanks, Royce. Judge, I want you to put on your judge hat and your pastor hat. I want you to put them on at the same time, because I was always told that hurt people, right? And if you listen to what Royce just said, that there's some chemical imbalances based on the perpetuation of trauma, right? To which I don't think the court systems even consider. I noticed that when I've talked to you, you would say you would look at not just what the child did, but you would look at extenuating circumstances, right, around those things, and take those things into consideration when adjudicating those particular cases, right? So I want to talk about, do we broaden our lens to understand how, not just contemporarily, but how futuristically COVID-19 will adversely impact the African American community?
I need you to clarify that a little bit.
No, well, let me just say this. If people are being hurt,
mm-hmm.
and hurt people, mm-hmm. then we can have an increase in crime or murder in the community based on even, we cannot separate this, right? That's what I'm saying.
You can't separate it. I mean, but we do have to compartmentalize to a degree because, again, COVID is COVID, and then there are other crimes that are being committed just because people have that impulse, and some persons are they're geared that way. But first of all, I have seen a number of articles in recent weeks saying that over the last couple of years, there has been an increase in crime overall. There's just, we had a situation here at a local Wendy's right here in Cincinnati, recently, where two girls walked in out of the drive-through, came into the store because they didn't like the way their food was handled to them, walked behind the counter into the back of the Wendy's and commenced to beat up a young lady. And she suffered serious injury. They weren't wearing masks, caught on camera, and it gets just one example of the increasing amount of rage that is occurring. And some of those statistics have directly been related to COVID because of over the last few years. You're absolutely right, as I believe Mr. Kennebrew stated, is that there's increasing trauma, not just to the older people, but obviously if older people are experiencing trauma and losing their minds and becoming irrational and becoming violent, then obviously that's going to parlay over into the youth. And then when you're dealing with youth, it's important to understand, and this is one of the things that I dealt with as a juvenile court judge, that a lot of people weren't looking at, that I began to incorporate in terms of rehabilitation over incarceration. And that was young minds aren't even developed fully until the mid-20s. And so when you're looking at impressionable young children, elementary, junior high, high school, and their brains aren't even fully developed, that means that they act oftentimes on impulse, and they lack control, they lack self-control. And so when you add the increasing trauma brought on by the fact that, yes, people are dying around them, the fact that they can't go to school, they can't interact, and people are in general are not only spiritual beings, but we thrive off of interaction with other people. I have nieces and nephews, just turned, all of them are actually 13 right now. And it was very difficult for them to be isolated, because that's what's happening. They're being isolated at home to protect themselves, being isolated from their friends. And then you have college kids that were going to school or learning remotely, or even in college, they were being isolated at college, and it's driving people, for lack of a better word, almost crazy in some respects. And so, yes, when people are traumatized emotionally, and it's already been stated, trauma impacts us whether we realize that we're traumatized or not. Your body, there are certain things in your brain that are released. There are certain stress chemicals that are released hormonally that we aren't even aware of when we're traumatized. And if you internalize that and are not able to express that, when those buttons are pushed, especially if you're young and you don't have impulse control, it's going to come out in violence, which assaults. It's going to come out in some form, in some way, as you've stated, it is going to either lead to criminal activity or could definitely be on the brink. And so, yes, when you're talking about that, then the impact of becoming a part of the criminal justice system, especially at a very young age, parlays into future contacts with the criminal justice system. So yes, it is going to have an impact, most likely for generations to come.
You know, Mr. Mayor, I like to ask the judge a question. When I hear this word resilience, and I think about what you just described, this notion that, at least in my mind, you're living in this toxic environment. We can't change your environment, but we're going to help you live in it, make you more resilient, make you less vulnerable to the kind of risks that can come from that. How do we, well, first of all, if I've got it right, the focus on the individual or to focus on this broader context in which this toxic environment is now threatening the health of our kids?
Well, when we talk about chewing, being able to walk and chew gum at the same time,
okay,
being forced to have to do that whether we want to or not. It's impossible not to look at the broader implications of what is happening and how we're all being impacted. But at the same time, we have to treat the group, but we have to treat the individual. And
okay,
that's where my role, especially as a pastor, comes in, because I spend a lot of time calling people. I spend a lot of time listening to people. And yeah, older people are depressed, even from being isolated from going to work. So even older people, and then the sheer numbers, especially for us who are older, and we're getting reports every day of someone dying. And it's not just older people that are dying, it's young people that are dying. Right. It's children that are dying. And again, so I have a responsibility to help manage, if you will, to try to help manage the mental and the spiritual health of persons that present to me. I have to be able to recognize, are persons being overwhelmed? Are they dealing with a depression? Are they being spiritually oppressed? Because the truth is, it's pressing us in from all sides. And so as a spiritual leader, I have to find a way to help to continue to reach not only the individual, but to also speak prophetically to the masses so that people do not lose hope. We have to, even in the midst of COVID, we still have to be able to preach and teach, but there is still hope. There is still God. And as long as God is active, there is still hope. And so I have to move people from a state of oppression and depression to a place of hope.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Pastor. And I want to go to Dr. Close. Dr. Close, I mean, this is your space in terms of death. I mean, it's what you've chosen to do with your being is to accommodate the families during this most critical time. And so you've seen more families in that moment of grief. I want to talk about our men for a moment. You mentioned something about the shortest Bible verse was Jesus wept. Many men have associated crying with femininity and the lack of being a man. How are our young men dealing with their pain?
It's kind of, first of all, let me say to both my colleagues, thank you. And Pastor, that was a powerful word, because sometimes we forget who are the part of the healing process to heal. and I appreciate it. You know, I think one thing that the mayor, that we're trained as young men, be strong, don't cry, that macho process. And it takes individual like Brother Royce who has the educational part to present it plainly. I think sometimes we're so educated that we forget how to speak plainly. And no matter what name you want to call him, there's someone higher than us. He was a plain talking spirit that made even everything plain. And sometimes education, as Paul says, may be mad. So in order for us to reach, part of my ministry is reaching men and just being straightforward with them. It's okay to cry, no matter how bad you are in the street. And the reason why I'm like Jeremiah, if I have a moment, I will not have a problem shedding my tears, because I'm more of a man that I'm willing to be vulnerable to share those things. And even the baddest person on the street who's male has someone that can push their button to make them still be the child. And I think what we have to do is be able to look into all these experiences men are going through and realize, you know, there's a child in that man. We're trained in what I do for a living. That might not be someone's father, might not be someone's uncle, but that's somebody's child. And with that process, we must reach the child in it, no matter what the bad experiences they've had. You know, COVID has made me change a lot. I'm old school. Take your hat off. There's certain things I wouldn't tolerate. I had to learn, because of the grief process, people are looking for an out to relieve their grief. And me might say one little thing like, "Sir, don't take your hat off." And I say it 4 or 5 times. I'm gonna say it one time. If they're gonna wear the hat, they're gonna wear the hat. I had 2 services this past week, over 300 people, and I gave away 200 masks. And I kept saying, "You gotta wear your mask." I had to tell the preacher, "Could you tell them to wear their mask? Can you tell them to pull the mask over their nose?" Now, I had 200 masks, and by the end of the day, I only had 5. That means people were not wearing masks. So I had to come up with, I would say to the ladies, "How many shoes do you have?" "Oh, I got a lot." Then once you get a mask for every different colors to match your shoes.
That's good.
And to the men, I would say, you know, I got a suit jacket. I have a mask in each of my suit jacket pocket, and I also have one in each of my pants. I said, because sometimes we lose the mask, but you need a mask to get into the building. You're gonna need a mask. I had one young lady that was so angry at me because I told her, I said, "Why didn't you have your mask?" I got irritated because it's kind of repeating. I'm saying the same thing over and over. And she said, "Well, I didn't like how you said it." I said, "Well, is this your daughter who's 5 years old?" She says, "Yes." I said, "I want you to be around for her. So if you have to be mad at me, be mad at me, but put on the damn mask."
Ooh, she got that message.
I would say that at a funeral.
And I guess I guess it mass is important.
And you know what I turn around and say? We've lost funeral directors. I lost preachers. And they're the same people that you call when you're in duress, and you're killing them for not wearing a mask.
Right.
Yes, you're right.
You know, just like what's happening in Alabama about funeral directors we know have COVID cases. I have a young family right now. Their son just died at Johns Hopkins, 13 years old, from COVID-19. And they have no resources. Yeah, FEMA is gonna reimburse them, but they don't have no resources. And it took me a couple of days to try to convince them, we can still celebrate his life, but you don't have the money, so let's do this. And they were so stuck in their mind, they want to spend all this money, and you didn't have the money. And what do we do about those individuals who are economically strapped, as was mentioned by Brother Royce today? What do you do in the economics and they still have to bury their loved one? And at the same time, I have to say to my colleagues across the globe, it's still a business.
Yeah.
And that sounds harsh to people, but those, we call them containers, the caskets, the box, that cemetery cost, that car that you want cost, and trying to say to people, you got to live after all this stuff. Right. And that's my favorite line. My staff hates that I use that word. You're in business. No, I'm into the process of helping people move from one perspective to another. God always provides for me, but they do have to live. And why put all that money in the ground or whatever option you do? Because the next day, the U.S. Post Office is coming, whenever they come, and they're going to be bringing bills, or you're going to have an email, a bill's going to be text to you. So I think that's part of the grief for the men who are economically struggling. They were already struggling before this, and even though they're the statistics say there are jobs available, I won't go into that great debate. But some of them are not equipped even to maintain a basic job. And so what has happened? The church, the funeral home, the barber shop, the beauty shop, we are the only outlet for economic survival for that community. We're all putting out fires in our own different way. And the favorite line they always say to a funeral director when they die, boy, if he got all the money or she got all the money people owed him, he would have had a better life. Well, we're not always doing it. Some of my colleagues are not going to like this, but they'll be texting me tonight and email me. It's not all about money. It's about healing. Because if you heal someone, they will make sure that you do all right. And I had some people today poured into me, and I'm considered a healer. And I got emotional because they were just telling me how much they appreciate what I did. And what I did was just be kind. And that's hard for us in this country to learn how to be kind. And as pastors, we got to be kind even when I know you haven't done or said what you want to say. And I still got to love you. Right. And I've learned to love them, Pastor, even when I want to say what I really want to say.
Well, isn't that how Jesus did? I mean, not you trying to, follow Jesus, unconditional love, agape love. Isn't that what that's all about, right?
I'm supposed to have it, but I'm also flesh.
Yeah, so I got
sometimes, you. And sometimes flesh, you got to have someone that you confidant. And I must be honest, I lost 2 dear friends that I could really say what I wanted to say and wasn't judged for what I said, and they understood and we would laugh, and they're now gone. Both of them are COVID. Yeah. So I have to learn now how to remanage, how to say some things in the car and say, Lord, you know how I really think, and then go and deal with it.
Absolutely.
That's difficult.
There is no one, and I think based on what we saw today, there's no one that's not been impacted either directly or indirectly by COVID-19. We've had some people like Katrina Randolph, who has been in the trenches, or where the rubber hits the road. Out there, she is a stylist. Dr. T called her the short hair queen. I told her that I have not grown up high. I've not come to that point where I can make that statement. He can, I can't. But
she's something else. She's a warrior.
But she has truly, and for those, I guess this young lady has been with us from the beginning, and she has truly transformed her space in conscientious people who understand the gravity of this moment. And she has been at the cutting edge, right?
There we go.
Of making that happen. Ladies and gentlemen, Katrina Randolph, how you doing, Katrina?
Give her some snaps.
Great. I am great. Just sitting here listening to this conversation, just being able to service these clients behind this chair every day and have these COVID conversations. I see about 10 clients per day. And I tell you, every conversation is about somebody losing a loved one to COVID. And it can be very overwhelming at times, but I remain faithful, trying to be strong for my clients, trying to encourage them about their loved ones. And at the same time, I'm losing loved ones to COVID or sudden deaths. It can be very overwhelming and stressful sometimes. Sometimes behind my chair, I say, I feel like a minister in training. I really trying to be there for them, keep them encouraged. And I say, Lord, my spirit is definitely willing to do this job and to be behind this chair and to advocate for these clients and to be supportive of them. But then my flesh get weak too. And then what do? I need a shoulder to cry on sometimes. So, it can be definitely overwhelming. We definitely in some trying times right now. And I just say, for barbers and stylists, we're definitely on the front line, being able to support our clients during a time like this.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Katrina. Yes. Sandra Jenkins is up near the Philadelphia. She
All
hails
right,
from Philadelphia.
Philadelphia.
Yeah, and she's been on the front line as well. Another one of our warriors out there.
Indeed. Some snaps
doing her great work.
for Sandra.
Sandra, unmute yourself and let's hear from you.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly with Katrina. I'm right there with her, right in here in Pennsylvania. I have to say that you have to meet your clients where they are. It doesn't matter where they come from. Each and every one has lost someone as a result of COVID. And that is the direction that I have to take, in this whole dilemma. My clients, they have and they struggle with keeping their mask on. I mean, of course, they have to take their masks off while they're getting shampooed, and the little let's just say arms around the mask get wet. So we provide extra masks at every level without having to badger them or convince them, okay, the importance of a mask. We provide a mask, a fresh, clean mask of every level that that they may need one. If they're getting a hair color, and if it gets stained, or they walk in with a mask that you may seem that looks somewhat soiled, you provide a clean mask upon arriving to the salon each and every time. So with that exercise and getting the staff to understand the importance of wearing a mask at that type of setting, knowing that everyone cares about you, that you're getting a clean mask each and every time. So, that is very true, Katrina. I'm wholeheartedly with you on everything you said.
I just love listening to what is going to be the business differentiator. While there's fighting out there about masks, some of you have gotten calls for people wanting to know, am I going to be safe if I come to your shop? So that's going to make the difference going forward. So we have some real best practices here, Mr. Mayor. We need to spread this all over the country.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Sandra.
And this is a sacred space by which we have this this conversation. We're gonna do the word cloud, because what we do each week, and I got to bring up Andre Russell too soon. Believe me, I'm gonna bring you up, Andre. So prepare. But Dr. T, I think it's important that we kind of get a pulse of where we are, because this, everybody is thinking about somebody. If you just take a moment, you can think about somebody you lost, and then it's compounded when it's somebody who died of COVID, and it becomes even more problematic when they were unvaccinated. And knowing that they probably could have survived, even if they contracted COVID, had they been vaccinated. And so what we are doing is not shaming and blaming, because we recognize that that's not helpful, right? But what we are saying to you is that this is a time to sober up and understand that it can happen to you.
Yes.
And that your family can very well be strapped with the grief of your loss, of the loss of you. And we don't want one more. Let me say this. I'm not talking about 50 people. I'm not talking about 10. I don't want one more person to die of COVID-19. We don't want you to die of anything, but we certainly don't want you to die.
That's right. Totally preventable.
That's preventable at this point. So what we're going to do, let's do
So just think of a word. Think of a word right now that just best reflects how you're feeling in this pandemic, and enter it into the chat. And one word at a time, but as many words as possible. We'll do like 60 seconds as we continue this conversation. And those people out there in cyberspace on Facebook watching us live, you can use the Q&A box, and the tech team will build that cloud. They'll let us know when it's ready. And Omar, we've been doing this since the beginning of these shows. We have over 50 of them. And that cloud has really mapped what's going on in our Black and Brown communities. It's a very interesting way of launching a conversation.
Yeah. What we are going to have to do is we're going to have to deal with a lot of issues And so I want, Meg, I want you to tee up just a piece of Dr. Jones. Let me tell you this, Dr. T, man, Dr. Jones last night, I think she was incredible. I want everybody to see her because she contextualized something that I think we got to put in perspective, even as it relates to COVID, is that we're dealing with a system of inequity.
That's right.
All right, which can be, categorized as racism.
That's right.
And she mentioned something. She said, you got to say the word.
That's right.
As a physician, she recognized you have to call it what it is, right, in order to deal with it, right? And so what I want to do is, as we're doing the word cloud and putting all that together, Meg, let's see a little bit of her clip and what she did, and as encapsulating this concept of racism and putting it where the cows can get it.
This is Dr. Kamar Jones. And while that screen's coming up, what you're about to see was presented to a broad audience, including physicians.
All understand that racism exists, even those of us who have lived our whole lives thinking this is the land of equal opportunity. I call this story Dual Reality, a Restaurant Saga. And this story, like many of my allegories on issues of race and racism, is prompted by something that happened in my own real life. So come join me as I'm a first-year medical student. First-year medical student, studious, very diligent. On this particular Saturday, like on most Saturdays, I had awakened early in the morning and hit the books, studying nose in. It got to be mid-afternoon, and some friends of mine came over to the apartment. And did they distract me from my studies? Oh no, we all got to studying long and hard, and now it's getting to be late. And we're getting hungry, and I have no food in the apartment, which was so typical of me that my friends were like, okay, never mind, Kamara, we understand, but we're hungry. So let's go into town and find something to eat. So we do. So we walk into town and we find a restaurant, and we walk in and we sit down. The menus are presented. We order our food. The food is served. Here we are eating. So maybe not the story about racism in a restaurant that people in my generation might have thought I was about to tell. But hold on, there is a very enlightening story in this restaurant about racism. So here I am sitting with my friends eating, and I look across the room and I notice a sign that's a startling revelation to me about racism. So now I've probably intrigued you. And you're wondering, okay, Dr. Jones, what did the sign say? Oh, what did the sign say? The sign said open. So now I know I've lost many of you. So, because how is an open sign a sign about, a startling revelation about racism? Well, let me recap. Here we are, my friends and I, sitting in a restaurant eating. I look across the room, see a sign that says open, thinking no more about it. I would assume other hungry people could walk in, sit down, order their food, and eat. But because I knew something about the two-sided nature of those signs, I recognized that indeed now the restaurant was closed due to the hour, but firmly closed. And that other hungry people, just a few feet away from me, but on the other side of that sign, would not be able to come in, sit down, order their food and eat. And that's when I recognized that racism is structuring open-closed signs in our society. That racism is structuring, if you will, a dual reality. And for those who are sitting inside the restaurant at the table of opportunity eating, and they look up and they see a sign that says open, they don't even recognize that there's a two-sided sign going on because it is difficult for any of us to recognize a system of inequity that privileges us. So, for example, it is difficult for men to recognize male privilege and sexism. It is difficult for white Americans to recognize white privilege and racism. In fact, it's difficult for all Americans to recognize our American privilege in the global context, except we are living it so large right now with how much of the global supply of COVID-19 vaccine we have sequestered in this nation. Now, those on the outside are very well aware that there's a two-sided sign going on because it proclaims closed to them, but they can look through the window and see people inside eating. So back inside the restaurant, to those who ask, is there really a two-sided sign? Does racism really exist? I say, I know it's hard for you to know when you only see open. In fact, that's part of your privilege, not to have to know. But once you do know, you can choose to act. So it's not a scary thing to name racism. It's actually an empowering thing to name racism. It doesn't even compel you to act, but it does equip you to act so that if you care about those on the other side of the sign, which is an if, but if you do, why, you could even talk to the restaurant owner who is, after all, inside with you. And you could say, restaurant owner, they're hungry people outside. Why don't you open the door, let them come in? You'll make more money. And oh, the conversations we could have. Or maybe what you'll do is pass some food through the window, or maybe you'll try to tear down that sign or break through the door. But at least what you won't be doing is sitting back saying, wonder why those people don't just come on in and sit down and eat. Because you'll understand something about the two-sided nature of that sign that proclaims open to you. So when I have 5 or 6 minutes to share with a group of people.
Thank you so much. That's Dr. Kamara Jones. She's in Atlanta, Georgia, but she just laid it out in such a profound way. Let's give her some snaps. So
that's right. Did she put it where the cows can get it, Mayor?
Put it where the cows can get it, Mayor, I'm telling you. And you know, let me say this, because I think that when people was first thinking, and I think that public policy and a lot of things was were influenced by the fact that who were dying initially.
Okay.
Right. You know, and this is really being honest. When there's certain people, and Dr. T, you talk about, you know, health equity issues all the time, right?
That's right.
And health disparities, right? And comorbidities that are enhanced by the uneven treatment of people in this society.
That's that normal we don't want to go back to.
That's right. So people say, well, let's go back to normal.
No.
We weren't, what you say, we were sicker,
living sicker, dying younger. That's right.
Right. And so we got a lot of work to do. So maybe, you know, this notion of disequilibrium allowing for growth, maybe COVID is that silver lining that says that, you know, maybe we can kind of reshuffle the deck so that we can really evaluate how we're living, take value in our lives.
That's right.
And then begin to live a healthier life in the future, because now we have a greater value for our life. So that's one of the things we want to do. Let me bring up Andre, because I didn't bring up Andre, and obviously I need to bring up Andre before I move further, and then I'm going to have this conversation. Hey, Andre, how you doing? Andre is in the ATL, they call it Atlanta, Georgia. He has a shop in the Atlanta airport and other shops as well. He's been in this space for a long time, but he's a dear friend of the Cutting Edge Show. Hey, Andre, how you doing, my friend?
Fine, and thank you for allowing me to be here. You know, I'm the new kid on the block. But
you've been here with us the whole time, man. Don't be
but Brother Roy said something that fell on a conversation I had with some educators that I know this week about survival and the learning process, because some of the younger students tend to come in and they spend time with or without masks, but the educator has to get past the part where this person don't have on a mask with the kids I'm talking about. And so as opposed to spending time learning, they have to get back to the learning process. And it goes on it's not a group thing, it happens to be individuals. And when he said the survival part, I said, yeah, because this is either run and hide or let's gather as a group and learn. But with children, it's an obstacle for the educators. And we actually sat down and talked about it, about how to gather everybody into one thought process, and that's learning, as opposed to wondering why that person doesn't have on a mask, and that person, because that has to do with what's happening at home, and which is a different conversation. But what they're trying to do is let the kids come out with something positive during the day. However, it takes a little bit longer to get to the learning than what usually happens before. And when you're talking about the norm, we're outside of the norm now, and everybody here is talking about normal. They want the governor to say no more masks, but that's not going to happen, and I don't think it should. And that's about as much as I want to let Brother Royce wants to speak something else. But that's about as much time as I want to take, because next week I want to say something else.
Hey, Omar, I just want to put one thing on the table, because Judge Hunter said what this trauma does to the growing brain.
Mm-hmm.
And that lack of decision-making ability that you say can show up in the church or in the home shows up when people show up in the barbershop and salon. So Andre, do you see kids where you have to step in and de-escalate a situation? Do you see kids making poor executive decisions because of the accumulated trauma? And how do you handle it when you do see it?
I give out a lot of candy and potato chips, but
that's where we get the obesity from. Now we know you the reason why we got all these big kids.
The maladaptive coping behavior, but it does make you feel good.
Right. You always trying to make Andre feel better about it. You know, he's making
an answer to that is, we still have the adults, their parents, caregivers, whoever brings the kids in, they may or may not have the kids wear a mask. And we have children-sized masks at our shop. But it's hard to explain to them that they should have a mask when they've been riding around all day with someone and no one has said, wear a mask. Right. And so then we have to explain to them, say, it's not for you, it's for me. It's not for me, it's for you. And it takes a few minutes for kids to get that. Matter of fact, the smaller children cry when they get in the chair. So, yes,
they don't want to get that haircut
anyway.
Potato
chips, potato chips.
Yeah, well, I get it. I mean, that's how y'all kind of distract them so that they don't know they about to lose their identity.
Yeah. But that we feel that if they leave with the mask on, that's one more that we will probably come back next week, because we love our repeat customers.
There we go.
That's good. I want to talk. Thanks, Andre, for hanging out with us. I want to have a conversation about the politicization of a pandemic, and how do we? And I know we're talking about grieving, but if we don't get this right, then we're going to grieve longer. Right? We know we've already lost a lot of people, right? But if we don't get this thing right in terms of not politicizing this pandemic, then there are going to be more lives lost to this COVID. I want Royce to ask the question, is it possible to depoliticize something like a pandemic?
It's absolutely possible to depoliticize it if you have the desire. I think that there are some in the political space that see an advantage by politicizing COVID, by riling up a certain base of people. Here I'm in the state of Michigan, and two ports which combined, or two bridges that combined have about $350 million of goods going across them a day, is being held up by truckers that have been influenced and inspired by Americans. You are seeing, and that's happening on the bridges. Now in Ottawa, several hundred miles away from the bridges, you're seeing people doing the same thing, but you're seeing Trump flags and QAnon flags and even Confederate flags waving in Canada, because of the politicalization that has occurred here. People see a benefit in being divisive because they understand that when people are united, their side doesn't win. So while it's a possibility for it to happen, as long as you have separate information and echo chambers that are informing people of what quote unquote truth is, then they will continue to promulgate and propagate these things that we know just aren't true. And it's to the detriment of everyone.
Yeah, let's bring up Dr. Carol Ritter, and then we're going to bring up the word cloud and give you that. Dr. Ritter is our resident physician and kind of a consultant in all things health and wellness. She is a gynecologist that is in the Maryland, Baltimore area. And of course, we are appreciative of her because she brings a unique perspective. And her willingness to listen and to learn and to be open and even vulnerable has really resonated with all of us. And so we are appreciative for her being with us on this ride from the beginning. So thank you, Dr. Ritter, for doing this. How are you doing, Dr. Ritter? Unmute and
yeah, thank you. Listening it made me sad. I put the word sad up there. I haven't put the word sad up in this group for a long time, or a negative word, because it usually uplifts me, but I've been faking it. I realized after listening to this, my resilience has got its limits too. And, you know, I work with women. There's a hell of a lot of domestic abuse going out there that I hear stories every day, and the tears on my shoulders, or they have to sneak out of their house to come to see me. They're on, you know, one woman's on the lam because her husband's